Welcome to Master Your Merger, the podcast for leaders navigating the people side of mergers and acquisitions. Each week, your host Klint Kendrick talks with deal makers, HR leaders, and integration experts to uncover what really works when it comes to people, culture, and performance during a deal. From retaining top talent to aligning leadership, you'll hear real stories and actionable insights from the people doing the work, all designed to help you make your merger work. If you're leading through M&A, this is your weekly playbook.
Welcome to Master Your Merger, the podcast that helps M&A professionals navigate the human side of deal making. I'm your host, Klint Kendrick, and today we're talking about one of the biggest challenges in M&A, how to keep your best people from walking out the door after an acquisition. Our guest today is Dr. Liz Lance, an expert in M&A integration, leadership, and change management. She's helped companies successfully integrate acquired teams, and her doctoral dissertation dug into what actually makes employees stay or leave after a deal. Dr. Lance's experience and research reveal a key insight. Employees don't just leave because of pay or culture clashes. They often leave when they stop believing they'll be successful with the buyer. So if you've ever struggled with turnover after a deal, you'll want to hear what Liz has to say. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. What a great opportunity to share my research.
I am really excited. Every time I run across a dissertation or thesis that addresses M&A, I'm excited. But you combine both that research background as a as a doctor now, but during your doctoral research work, and then you have hands-on experience working in M&A. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started working on deals and then why you wanted to spend time researching it during your doctoral program?
Yes, thank you. So my journey into M&A started with hands-on experience leading integrations in SaaS companies, software as a service. And of course, often many of us M&A practitioners jump into it having a project background or a finance background, and we kind of learn the first few deals as we go. And early on, I was seeing how often deals were structured around financial synergies, but neglected the people side of the equation. And because I was part of doing that integration work, that's my job, to care about the people side and to make sure that those people are being served. And so I felt like there was something missing. There was more for me to learn, and I needed to work on that. Because I knew that the people side was going badly, but I hadn't quite collected enough data on this to be able to mitigate this problem. As I went through, I noticed this recurring theme, which is that high voluntary attrition after acquisitions, and that many deals that even I worked on failed to deliver what they were trying to do because of these employee departures. And I'll be specific about this. Was working with an organization that had acquired another, largely for an engineering team that was gone within 2 months, and they had all gone to the same company together. People like to work with people they like to work with, and they all left right around the same time. And I went, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do with this thing? Now I've acquired a product that the engineers are gone. Nobody knows how to run it. The lights are still on, but what if something weird starts happening? And so this is what led me to my doctoral studies, focusing specifically on how do we build environments and engage people in a way that makes them want to stick around, not makes them stay, but makes them want to stay. And so it all started because I was frustrated picking up the pieces of high voluntary attrition and wanted to figure out how to make that not so much a problem.
Well, and you got to see the deal impact too, Liz, right? I mean, I hear stories where entire groups leave because there's a very well-liked leader or
Yes.
somebody on the team that's just sort of sticky, really. People like working with them, to your point, and off they go, leaving your deal in limbo and wasting potentially millions of dollars. I'm just curious, in that situation, how did it turn out? Were you able to recruit folks to backfill those jobs, or did the product not go well?
It's a great question. This is tricky because you're not only replacing a couple roles with people around them that know what's going on and can help train those folks. You really have to start, I hate to say from scratch, because you're not starting from scratch. You have an existing product, but you have to find people. And it's so incredibly difficult to find people that can jump right in and get started, especially on proprietary, complex software. So it took a while. And even like 1 year down the road, it was not to the same state that it would have been had those folks stuck around. So we talk often about the cost of attrition, cost of voluntary attrition especially, and that magnified in this instance. And you mentioned something that is super duper important here, which is that people follow leaders or they follow the people they like to work with. And in other research that we're not talking about today specifically, but in other research that I've done, I've found that when a close colleague leaves an organization, those that work close to them are 5 to 6 times more likely to start looking around and leave themselves in the next 6 months. And so when you have this attrition contagion, is the word I like to use, happening, it's really, really risky for maintaining the value of the organization that was acquired, especially when it is one of those types of organizations where the people are creating the product, and that is the value in the acquisition is buying the organization that creates and can sustain a services product, as an example.
Great examples. And what a great story. I done some analysis on just the cost of turnover based on some of the research that's out there. And it's amazing, even in a small deal, if you lose a portion of your leadership team and then some of your key players, even in like 100-person acquisition, you can lose millions of dollars in deal value in just the first year, just because of the cost, like the hard costs of retraining, replacing, recruiting, sometimes relocating the folks coming in. So
Yes.
and that doesn't include the cost of the product. That's just the cost of backfilling head.
And what a grand distraction in a time where you're driving so much other change. You're having to convince people over and over again, we're going in this new direction. We're doing this new thing. It's worth doing. And everybody that was here before, they decided it wasn't worth doing and they left. So it's worth doing. Please stay.
Right. Well, so Liz, I've read through your dissertation. It's incredibly well done. Based on your research and experience, why do people leave after a deal? What drives them away or maybe lures them away?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for looking at my dissertation. Those are long documents. But what I found is one of the biggest reasons that people leave after an acquisition is that uncertainty. Everything they know about their job and how it's been going, where the company's going, just kind of drops out from under them overnight. And the moment that employees hear about this, their minds are flooded with questions. In fact, often people just can't listen to the rest of the talk. We love to plan hour-long all-staff meetings to talk about it. You only really have the first 10 minutes to get any type of an impression with folks because they just are flooded with these questions. Do I still have a job? Who am I going to report to? Will my work be valued in this new structure? And so in my research, I sought to understand the impact of an acquisition on an employee's perception of self-efficacy. And this is their belief that they can be effective and successful in their role in the new context. And when self-efficacy is high, employees generally stick around and they navigate that change because they believe in their ability to do so. But when it's low or lowered with the M&A change impacts, they are far more likely to consider leaving. And M&A often introduces new leadership, culture, changes to systems, processes, all of which can make employees feel like they've lost that control.
So it sounds like there's a couple of components there, right? So one is do I feel like I can be successful? How do I fit into this organization that's changing around me? Is my job itself going to be as good? There's a swirl of things going on, but when you focused on self-efficacy, what are some of the things, Liz, that help build self-efficacy? What are some of the things that companies do probably unintentionally to lower those perceptions of self-efficacy?
Yeah, this is a great question. So self-efficacy, and sometimes people mistake this with confidence, but it's incredibly different. Self-efficacy is actually a theoretical framework created by Albert Bandura, and it talks about sources of self-efficacy and then the effects. So the sources are mastery experiences, vicarious experiences where you get to see someone else do it rather than doing it yourself, which is a mastery experience, verbal persuasion, you can do it, and physiological feedback, that feeling when you're about to do something that you're unsure of, you get those butterflies or maybe other feelings. Your body's telling you either you believe in your ability to do this or you don't. So those are the things that contribute to that perception of self-efficacy. And then the result is you move towards things, you put in more effort, you really engage with those items, and you can manage that stress more effectively. So the things that can support self-efficacy or the things that diminish it the things that can support self-efficacy, as I mentioned, are like trying it, seeing someone else do it, being told how it's going to go, how it's been done in the past, and seeing that for themselves and really starting to be able to see themselves in that new changed environment in a new way. But the things that erode self-efficacy are everything around, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know, this is different than what I expected. And especially, you mentioned leadership. When leadership shifts and you no longer have that relationship or that trust in leadership, it feels like everything that you knew is gone. Everything is different. Everything will continue to be different. And it's just this chaotic spiral to a point where often people look for something entirely new because there is some implied stability, even in the new thing, because what they knew before has just fallen apart.
Right. Right. No, that makes complete sense. I love the fact that there's an actual gut feeling, right? There's this body response when we feel like we can do something or not. And I've been acquired a few times in my career, and I remember sitting in my chair, hearing about my company being acquired, and my gut just dropped, right? I had a baby at home. I had a 2-year-old at home. I'm like, what am I going to do? And it never occurred to me that part of that was, can I survive? Can I make it with this new leadership? Now, ultimately, they messed with my pay, and I was like, I can't even pay my rent, much less do my job, right? But that aside, that feeling in the moment, what are some things that folks can do in the announcement meeting or in the first couple of days that can really help boost that, specifically in the merger context?
And I'll talk about one thing you mentioned as well as I go into what companies can do, which is it's not just about the job, it's about your personal situation, what you have going on at home. And I love that you mentioned that because it's not just me, it's me and those I love. How can I continue to provide for those I love and those that rely on me? So to answer your question of what companies can do about this, this is change management 101, which more on that to come. But change management, are you giving folks enough information such that they know why this is happening, what is happening, when it's happening, right? We know these, the 5 W's.
Yeah.
But you leave out how. Nobody cares about how at that moment. Nobody even has the mental capacity to listen to how. We love to talk about how in this moment as M&A practitioners that haven't failed at this many times. But let's cover our bases. Let's talk about, will your pay change? And oh, by the way, don't make promises that aren't real. Don't speculate. If it's not real, say, we don't know yet, but we're going to let you know as soon as we do. And here's where you're going to get that information. So
Thank you for
important.
saying that. That's so critical. Please go ahead.
Yes. No, really, really important because this is actually something that I saw time and time again in my research is folks are saying, well, they came into this meeting and they promised us all these things and they said that these things weren't going to change and then they did. So those false expectations and empty promises actually eroded trust more than saying, hey, we haven't figured this out yet. So it's absolutely okay to say that you don't know or you haven't figured it out yet, as long as you provide a clear path to following it up. So back to the things that you can do, making sure that it's factual, but to say your pay is not going to change, your benefits will change, and they often do. Here's how they are going to change. And to say, oh, we don't know yet, sure, but you do have an opportunity to find that out before the deal closes or you announce it to folks. Like, go the extra mile, pull somebody under the tent that handles your benefits, look across both organizations and have a really good comparison. It's not rocket science. Just do it because those are the things that people are thinking about because they have children at home or they have folks with medical needs or they have medical needs themselves or upcoming things. That's what they want to know. If I stick around and navigate whatever nonsense is about to occur, can I afford it? Do I have a job? Those are the basic things. And if you can cover those and then move forward pretty swiftly into here is our combined strategy. Here's how it's going to work. You're building that confidence. And as long as you deliver on it, you're rebuilding that. Here's how it's going to go. Here's what's happening. And as long as you're consistent and truthful and the things you talk about actually happen, then you can try and keep people with you. There's, of course, a myriad of other things that you can do to try to help. But that's where I see it go wrong the most is when people make promises about things that, honestly, often they have no business making promises about. Or they don't answer the basic questions and just leave people in that spiral because, as I'm sure you know, when you don't answer questions or you don't say you don't know yet, and that you'll come back. People love to make up stories in that white space. And those are some of the most creative things I have ever heard, but that often just leads to continued fear, anxiety, and reduced perceptions of self-efficacy.
Liz, in all of the things that you shared, I haven't heard the answer being retention bonuses. And retention bonuses tend to be our gold standard. And, my theory is because we still look at M&A through a financial lens more often than we look at it through a people-powered lens. So can you talk a little bit about retention bonuses and how those played out in some of your research and experience?
Yes, retention bonuses, very popular, as you mentioned. They can buy time, but they do not build long-term commitment. And because I asked about this in my research, and I found that financial incentives alone do not address the root causes of M&A attrition. It's a thank you for my retention bonus. I put it in my pocket. I went on a vacation. Okay, I still have the same problems. Employees do not want to just be paid to stay. They want to feel like they have a future in the new organization and that their work matters. Yes, money is great, but it does not change those psychological things that determine if somebody's going to stick around. I have some suggestions on what you could maybe do, but they all focus on honoring and empowering employees.
Well, let's talk about those. So you've given us some don'ts, right? So don't make promises you can't keep. Don't be vague. Obviously don't lie. You didn't say it that way, and I don't mean intentionally lie, but don't make up answers that you don't know the answer to. So we know that those are some of the don'ts. What are some of the do's?
Yes, and when we talk about don't lie, sometimes leaders will give an answer about the way that they expect it will work. And then sometimes, legal's a great driver of this, it can't work that way for a variety of reasons. So it's not often an intentional lie, but it's here's how I want it to work or here's how I expect it to work, and it just can't happen that way. So what you could do instead, we talked about clear communication, what's changing, what to expect. It's so important. I was just talking to somebody casually about this yesterday, about honoring the historical organization. Not just saying, thanks, obviously that's why we bought you, but by taking time to note that change, honor the experiences, honor the culture of that organization, because it's going to change. And it's just so important to really mark that moment so that there is a time that can be remembered by those folks that the shift occurred, and to protect that honoring time. Next is to ensure that acquired employees have a voice. They don't just get put under this large umbrella and they're never thought about again. They need to have a voice in shaping that new culture and process and opportunities to build connections with both new and historical employees. I know that it feels silly to spend corporate money to bring folks together, especially if they're going to work remotely. Why would we bring these folks together to meet each other? It matters. It matters so much. Another component of this is that leadership visibility. It matters to see leaders from the acquiring and acquired organization working together, saying the same things, supporting the same strategy. Because folks from the acquired organization are looking to their historical leaders for cues as to, is this good for us? Is this going in the right direction? Should I still be here? Especially with founder-centric organizations. You see this so much. The sentiment of the organization is controlled by the founder in founder-centric organizations, and you know them when you see them. So it's really important that leadership is visible. I also have some suggestions about how to nicely move in the right long-term direction, because you cannot be a large multinational organization with a founder-centric business unit, as an example. You have to be more integrated than that. So there's some long-term plans around that, but it's important in the outset to see everybody together, working together, and defining and communicating a strategy for that combined organization, and then delivering a solid operating plan. Here's where we're going. Here's why it matters. Here's what you had before that's now integrated in the larger thing in terms of strategy. Here's how we're going to make it real. And then finally, really investing in training and development in this. You cannot expect people to just pick up everything you're putting down, because they're trying to deal with their own emotional reaction to this change, their own work, their customers who are also dealing with this change in many cases. And so folks need direct training to help them learn how to navigate that transition. And this does not mean training on your new HRIS. This has everything to do with change, how things will work, what's important to the combined organization. And in my personal opinion, and I know this takes time, Everybody should be receiving change management training. How humans react to change, it is a normal thing. Everyone, not just folks that have been recently acquired through their company, everyone should be receiving either new training or refreshers on this process, because that's how we're going to support each other best through this type of change.
Fantastic advice. One of the firms that I've worked with that did a really excellent job with integration, we would pull the middle managers together shortly before the announcement meeting. And it was only a 15-minute meeting. Hey, this is what's about to get announced. We know that you're dealing with this for yourself, and your team's also going to need you to deal with this. Here's a thing called Bridges Transition Model, which for those of you that are nerds like us, you'll know what that is. For those of you that aren't, it's just a change curve that people go through, and you can check that out. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. But we would train them just very briefly on the transition model so that they could understand where their people were. And then we'd do more of the change training for those middle managers as we went through the deal. And it made such an enormous difference in those middle managers being able to take care of themselves, because until they took care of themselves, they couldn't take care of their people.
That is so absolutely correct. And I love that you were doing that. And I love the Bridges model. So that's great. And I talk about this, and I use an airplane analogy, and I probably should change it because it's increasingly getting tricky, but that you have to put on your own oxygen mask first.
Right.
You cannot help other people navigate that change if you yourself are at the same point. And so that's why managers, especially middle managers who are squeezed between the layers of this organization, that's why it's especially important to equip them with skills and then also just a little bit of time to process. Because, and I mentioned about founders, but especially with middle managers, their people are looking to them to see how this is going. And if a middle manager is saying, oh, well, I just not sure, it's not going well, I'm seeing all of these changes, and they're telling that to their folks, that's all their folks are going to believe.
Right.
So it's incredibly important.
Yeah, the most trusted source of information in the organization is a person's direct manager, and has been that way for probably centuries, but as far back as we've got the research. So Liz, you've obviously done a lot of looking at retention and thinking about all of the factors that go into it. If you had a retention Swiss Army knife, what are the tools that would be in it?
Yes. So Swiss Army knives, they usually have a lot of tools. So I'm going to take that liberty here, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Okay. So retention Swiss Army knife. Let's start again, always. And this is on purpose that I repeat this. We're going to start with clear and frequent communication. I cannot say it enough. Humans need 7 impressions to actually remember something. Hopefully in this talk, you've gotten maybe 4. If you've watched the video, you've gotten extra. So clear and frequent communication. Transparency reduces uncertainty. Even if you say you don't know something, that's fine. Just make sure that folks know when you do know, that you will let them know and how to get that information. We talked about leader accessibility. Employees should feel like leaders are engaged and listening and also integrating within themselves. So that's the second one, leader accessibility. Third, and I've mentioned this a couple times, around a defined strategy and operating plan. I heard from multiple participants that they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what was supposed to happen, and they didn't know if their products or services were going to continue forward. And that made them feel like their work didn't matter. So everyone needs to know where the combined organization is going, why their work matters, and how their teams will achieve their collective goals. Super important. One that we didn't talk about is career paths. So great. I know why my work matters. Career paths, people need to see a future for themselves at that new organization as well. Not to just, and I've seen this time and time again, where folks are in a role and they get created into a business unit sitting over here, and there are not clear paths, either upward mobility in their business unit or into other areas of the organization. So clear career paths are really important. And we talked about cultural integration, the importance of sometimes spending money to acknowledge and blend those cultures rather than forcing a takeover, which is a felt thing.
Right.
I've got 2 more. Change management training. Can't advocate for this enough. Equip managers to support their teams effectively. And finally, recognition building, making people feel valued and connected. It is different than a cultural integration. Recognition and community building is a continuous process, but it's especially important in that 100 to 300 day period, especially. And really, it's that M&A success is about creating this new environment collectively where people want to stay, not just trying to pay them to do so, because we know that doesn't work.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think I may have to pick up one of those Swiss Army knives, Liz. So you interviewed a lot of people during your dissertation work. Are there any stories that really stood out to you while you were going through this work that drove home some of these critical things folks could do to help retain key people?
Interestingly, this is a great question. And interestingly, so my research looked specifically, I talked to folks that this was kind of tricky because folks that have left an organization through this process will love to talk to you and want to say all the things the company did wrong. But I wanted to think about and see what impacted perceptions of self-efficacy, specifically amongst folks that were still there.
Okay.
And because if you've already left, then you're out of that context. You have less incentive to remember or really think about it. I also excluded folks that were part of making the decision to be acquired specifically. And that then excluded founders and executive leadership in many cases, because I wanted to evaluate the impact on the majority of the organization, the largest quantity of employees. So the stories that I heard that were really interesting and unexpected. I did not as so much expect the consistent commentary about needing strategy. That was something that I really didn't expect, but made total sense to me. Was they need to know what products are continuing or what strategy we're going after and how their work fits in. Even if it's we're spinning this thing down, they want to know that. And I talked with folks that were more frustrated that they felt like their product was going to spin down, but that no one would acknowledge it, because it just creates this limbo space where they see the strategy of the company. This isn't what this company does, but we're still doing this thing. Why are we still doing this thing? So folks were really frustrated with that. And also just those feelings around, and we mentioned this, those feelings around being told something that wasn't real or that didn't happen. And even when it did come out what was real and was going to happen, those leaders, and we do this often as leaders, we don't like to say we were wrong or that we shared information when we didn't have all of the information. Leaders just assumed that the new information was fine and that people would just forget what they said before, which is never true, especially in these instances where people are thinking about, can I pay my rent and my medical bills? So those are two things that came out. Another thing that I thought was really interesting, which I didn't get to include in my research because of how focused doctoral research was how focused, I hear that time and time again, was the experience of moving from, and we see this sometimes, organizations will be carved out of a larger organization. So like a business unit of a super large company joins a smaller company that does something much more similar to what they do than what that larger company did. And I heard in multiple instances, really positive experiences of that.
Okay.
Yeah, because those folks, when they move from a big company that doesn't do anything like what they do except for their small business unit to a company where what they do is all they do, they're suddenly working with people that understand what they do and what products they create and what their core job is. And at the top level of the organization is a strategy that's aligned with what they deliver rather than we make money, woohoo. Because when you get to an organization of that size, that can sometimes be the strategy. We optimize these things, great. But when a group gets to leave a larger organization and join a small organization that is much more aligned and in context with what they do, those folks reported greater senses of accomplishment, of being understood, and of feeling that their work mattered. And in the experiences that I've had with this specifically, those smaller organizations are carved out of the larger ones for their innovative capability. And it could be a variety of them, but they're pulled out on purpose because that smaller organization is missing something. And so those two together, suddenly you're not just a number in an HRIS system. Imagine writing an email with your employee ID number at the top. Suddenly it's, hi, I'm Liz from this company previously. I'm now on this team reporting to this manager. Let's talk about it. So they actually get much more personal attention and experiences rather than being within a large organization where maybe they get a memo from the CEO every now and then, but it's not anywhere close to as personal.
That's fascinating. Liz, you've given me some things to think about. I've told leaders more than once that nobody cares about your strategy, right? What they really care about is, do I have a check? Can I pay my bills? Is my job going to be as good? And it sounds like that's a little bit too simplistic. And what I should be saying is nobody cares about your strategy unless you're telling them how they fit in. Or maybe a little bit more positively say, part of the information that folks need is how they fit into the strategy.
Yes. And I would say, I actually agree with you that no one cares about your strategy until at least day 30.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe slightly earlier in smaller organizations, but no one cares about your strategy until they know that, and they want to get their first paycheck from the new payroll system, right? That's what they want. They want to make sure my life will continue. My basic needs are met, right? If we talk about Maslow's, my basic needs are met here still. Great.
Right.
Okay. Then strategy helps inform, does my work matter? This is an emotional thing, but it also helps predict the continuation of basic needs being met.
Okay.
Yeah. So
if I'm part of the strategy, I'm going to have a paycheck.
That's right. If what you do is part of the strategy for this organization, your work is valuable and your basic needs are likely to continue to be met. That's why people care about strategy. It's basic needs and then emotional self-esteem, right? Am I being paid? Does my work matter? Do I feel like I can deliver good work that contributes to the strategy and we can feel good about moving forward in this direction together? That's what people care about.
Fantastic. Well, Liz, thank you so much for sharing all that. If our listeners want to dive deeper into your research or connect with you, where's the best place to find you?
Yes, so I love to talk about this. Big nerd. You can find my dissertation, which is called Keep Your Best Players, by reaching out to me directly. It is not published because there might be more content coming in this area.
Hey.
Yes, so reach out.
Little teaser there.
With a little teaser, yes. So reach out to me directly, liz@drlizlance.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn, where I share insights on M&A, lots on change management and organizational change. And you can connect with me there or also visit my website, drlizlance.com.
Wonderful. And Liz, we'll put links to all of those in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for joining the Master Your Merger podcast. This has been a great conversation.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Merger, hosted by Klint Kendrick. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this valuable, share it with someone leading through a deal. To explore toolkits, resources, and upcoming programs, including our free roundtables, visit masteryourmerger.com. We'll see you next time.